So Trump's sentencing is September 18th.
Tonight, former President Donald Trump's New York hush money case will remain in state court after a federal judge rejected his team's request to move.
So Donald's been trying to get it kicked to federal court, but it's going back to state court. So the sentencing hearing is still on September 18th, 2024.
The case into federal jurisdictions. Trump's lawyers cited the Supreme Court's ruling on presidential immunity and argued New York courts were biased against him. The judge has said that ruling doesn't pertain to this case, as the hush money payments were unofficial acts outside the bounds of executive authority. Trump is scheduled to be sentenced on September 18th.
All right, so that's one. There's another guy talking about it.
And it is, I think, gauged to try, and this is what he's doing in every single way, trying to not have this sentencing happen on the 18th of September, trying in a close race not to have a court pronounce some sentence.
There was one motion that said that they were going to appeal. That's kind of an interesting motion, because you'd be appealing the decision, the verdict, and any of the problems that happen in the trial itself. So that kind of makes sense to me, because you got the appeals court of the state, and you got the Supreme Court of the state, and then there's, district appeal and Supreme Court of the federal. So there's like 5 levels of appeals courts.
Which could include jail time. They would not make him go to jail right away, but they could say, Mr. Trump, you get jail for this. And that, we surmise, as do both campaigns, that would be a real political hit for him when he was actually convicted of the 34 counts in New York.
That's crazy, actually, in some respects, that I've seen poor people just, go to jail right then and there in the courtroom. And then he's been given, 2, 3, 4 months for a sentencing. And he's saying, Harry Littman is saying that he won't even go to jail there at the sentencing hearing. So, I mean, what other step is there after the sentencing hearing? Why wouldn't he go to jail right after the sentencing hearing? And you could get a maximum 4 years. 4 years per each one of those felony charges. So 34 times 4, it's 160, 36 years.
So the game here for him is to try to get out of sentencing. He's made a third motion to Mayor Chun, saying you should recuse yourself because your daughter worked for a political consulting firm that had Democratic clients, things like that, and nothing is.
So I want to talk about extradition. When it comes to extradition,
it starts with a crime and a suspect. A judge issues a warrant for his arrest, either because the police can't find him or because he failed to show up in court. Either way, he's now a fugitive. Then the police enter the suspect's name into a huge FBI database of wanted fugitives. They also have to punch in a code saying how far they're willing to travel to pick him up. Police officers in other states use that database whenever they stop someone for speeding or arrest them on other charges. So if the suspect ever comes in contact with the police, they'll know that he's wanted. If the database says his warrant is marked as not extraditable, that means police in the state where he's wanted won't come after him. At that point, the arresting officers usually just let him go.
So that's important. There's extraditable warrants, and then there's non-extraditable warrants, and that gets to the case law. So you have Puerto Rico v. Branstad, 1987. Then you got Kentucky v. Denison, 1861. So let's listen to Puerto Rico v. Branstad.
The 1987 U.S. Supreme Court case, Puerto Rico v. Branstad, centered on the extradition of fugitive Ronald Calder from Iowa to Puerto Rico. Calder, charged with homicide and attempted murder in Puerto Rico, was arrested in Iowa after fleeing. The governor of Puerto Rico requested Calder's extradition, but Iowa's governor denied the request, arguing that Calder wouldn't receive a fair trial in Puerto Rico. The Commonwealth of Puerto Rico then filed a complaint against Governor Branstad and the state of Iowa, but the district court dismissed the complaint, citing Kentucky v. Denison, a precedent which prohibited federal courts from ordering state governors to extradite fugitives. Ultimately, the Supreme Court reversed this decision, maintaining that Kentucky v. Denison no longer held validity. The court ruled that federal courts could now enforce the obligation to extradite fugitives, bringing an end to this discretion and ensuring consistency in direction for state officers. The Extradition Act, which allowed Puerto Rico to demand Calder's extradition, was also deemed applicable.
Okay, so that's the Branstad case, Puerto Rico. And then here's Kentucky v. Dennison.
V. Dennison, 1861. In 1859, a grand jury in Woodford County, Kentucky, indicted Willie Lago, a, quote, free man of color, unquote, with the crime of assisting a young slave girl escape the property of C.W. Knuckles and travel to Ohio. A writ of mandamus was issued by the Kentucky court to have Lago and the young girl extradited back to Kentucky to face trial. Governor William Dennison, Jr. of Ohio refused to extradite Lago and the young girl back to Kentucky. The case, being a dispute between two states, was appealed all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. In a unanimous decision, the Supreme Court ruled that it is the duty of the governor of Ohio to turn over both individuals when a request of extradition is made. However, neither Congress nor the federal courts can compel a governor to perform the duty of extradition.
So, now I'm going to talk about it. You heard how they had mentioned that it reversed the case. The one reversed the other. They're not completely contradictory. So in order to reverse the case, you got to be completely contradictory. I think that they both apply because Kentucky v. Dennison says you do not extradite, or you're supposed to extradite, but it's up to the governor to do the process. And this is going to lead to the Civil War. This is one of the reasons for the Civil War. And the Kentucky v. Dennison case I'll get to here in a second. So when it comes to Donald Trump, on September 3rd, 2024, a federal judge on Tuesday had rejected Donald Trump's request to intervene in his New York hush money criminal case. So that thwarts Donald Trump's latest bid to overturn his felony conviction and delay his sentencing. Now, if Donald Trump doesn't show up for the sentencing hearing, he doesn't go to New York, he just stays in Mar-a-Lago, he just stays in Florida. Well, then that means Donald Trump will get an extradition hearing. If this has been determined extraditable or if it's determined non-extraditable, then he could just chill in Florida. But if he could get the governor to not give a damn or get asylum for the thing, Donald has some options here. He's got some options. So let's talk about what the Constitution says in order to understand the law. Just like Jesus said, can't you determine for yourself, using common sense, what is right, what is wrong, what's, just, what isn't just? So the Constitution, you got the clause from Article 4, Section 2, Clause 2. And what Article 4, Section 2, Clause 2 says is this. A person charged in any state with treason, felony, or other crime who shall flee from justice and be found in another state shall, on demand of the executive authority of the state from which he fled, be delivered up to be removed to that state having jurisdiction of the crime. And so that means 34 felonies, he would fall under that purview. He would fall under that. Now, it does say on the demand of the executive authority. So it does say on the demand for the governor. So the governor would have to request it. Then there's also 30 days. There's paperwork. There's got to be a copy of the indictment. The copy of the indictment would need to be sent. And then the agent of that governor would have to, arrest him and bring him back within the 30 days of after he has been arrested. Now, I'm just going to mention this because right after Article 4, Section 2, Clause 2 is Article 4, Section 2, Clause 3. And that's the fugitive clause, the fugitive slave clause. There's some dumb shit in the Constitution. It kind of legalizes slavery, but it's also a liberation document, says Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass says it's not the Constitution that's a problem, it's the administration of it. So this is not law anymore. So when you read the Constitution, usually it'll be put in brackets and they say that it's not the law. But the Fugitive Slave Clause says, no person held to service or labor in one state under the laws thereof, escaping into another, shall, in consequence of any law or regulation therein, be discharged from such service or labor, but shall be delivered up on claim of the party to whom such service or labor may be due. Frederick Douglass said that this is a freedom document. At no point in time does it even say slavery. When you read that, you're not even for sure that it means slavery unless you can infer it, or you had been told about it beforehand. Because it's just saying, well, a person who was in service or labor in one state. Well, you could just be in service or labor to, a wage slave. You could just be a worker for somebody else. And so the fugitive slave clause comes right after that, just to put a little taint on Article 4, Section 2, Clause 2. Now, the federal law is 18 U.S. 1382. So 18 U.S. 1382 says this: whenever the executive authority of any state or territory demands any person as a fugitive from justice of the executive authority of any state, district, or territory to which such person has fled, and produces a copy of an indictment found or an affidavit made before a magistrate of any state or territory charging the person demanded with having committed treason, felony, or other crime, certified as authentic by the governor or chief magistrate of the state or territory from whence the person so charged has fled, the executive authority of the state, district, or territory to which such person has fled shall cause him to be arrested and secured, and notify the executive authority making such demand or the agent of such authority appointed to receive the fugitive, and shall cause the fugitive to be delivered to such agent when he shall appear. If no such agent appears within 30 days from the time of the arrest, the prisoner may be discharged. So if Donald was in Florida and he doesn't go to a sentencing hearing and say that it is extraditable, he's arrested, he sits in jail for 30 days, but no agent is sent to him. And then it also mentioned an affidavit or an indictment, but it's got to be an indictment, because if it's treason or felony or other crimes, well, then it would have to be an indictment, because you can't get an indictment, you can't get a felony charge unless you get a grand jury indictment first. Where does that come from? Well, that's the Fifth Amendment. No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia when in actual service in time of war or public danger. So none of those exceptions. He's not a part of the land or naval forces, he's not a part of a militia, and he's not in actual service in time of war or public danger. So therefore, you got to have a grand jury indictment. But Donald did get indicted. He got indicted a whole bunch of times for a lot of his cases. So the New York hush money case did have an indictment. There was an indictment. So they'd have to send a copy of that indictment. Then the governor would have to sign off on it. And then the governor would have to send an agent down there to retrieve Donald from Florida and then take him back. Now, Kentucky v. Denison, there's no way to compel the governor to give a person up. The reason why this is important for federalism, this is important because New York could just call, Florida up and just kick this person, that person, every other person that they want to whenever they feel like it. And so now you got a sovereignty issue. Well, does the governor of Florida work for the governor of New York? The governor of New York works for his own state. The governor of Florida works for his own state. So 1861, Kentucky v. Denison, this had to do with a mandamus, which for some reason, Marbury versus Madison, they had mandamus issues as well. Well, I know the court has this power, but a mandamus? I don't know if we have a right to a mandamus. A mandamus is basically a court order. Now, you had a free black man, I think William Lago is what that one video had said. The case of Kentucky v. Denison, 1861, this is one of the reasons for the Civil War. So it's Kentucky. Kentucky is a border state. It eventually goes to the Union, but it was a slave state. So Kentucky had this totalitarian white supremacist system. It had a segregated, wicked hellhole for black folks. I read the Alabama slave codes of 1852, and in these slave states, it was ridiculous. It was basically every white male from 18 to 45 was drafted to be a slave catcher. Everyone. And then there was like a million laws about you could do this, you couldn't do that. And apparently one of the laws was a free man of color. Okay, you're a free man, you're a free black man, you're a man with darker pigmentation, you're a free man of color, you have a right to be free yourself, but you better not be discussing or talking to the people that are in bondage. You better not hang out with them, you better not be their friends, you better not go to their slave quarters, and you better not even suggest that they should be free. And that's what this William Lago did. William Lago is a black man, and he told a black kid who was in slavery, who to go talk to in order for that kid to go get freedom from the Underground Railroad during the days of slavery. That was a felony. So, because William Lago had pointed the way to freedom for a kid, and so therefore some white supremacists, in Boone County, you had that Margaret Garner case. And Margaret Garner was, slashing her own kids' throats because she didn't want them to go back into slavery. So, enslaving black kids was okay. Beating them, whipping them, forcing them to work for nothing, dehumanizing them, all that was just fine and dandy. But you better not tell that kid to go to the North Star. Just go to the North Star, cross the river, and then that's where you'll get your freedom. You're not allowed to say that if you're a black man. Now, I'm not for sure I guess Caucasians were allowed. I'm not for sure if Caucasians were allowed to do it too. But that was a felony. A felony. Now, Donald has 34 felonies. If he doesn't even get one single day of jail time, does the word felony even mean anything? I always thought that there's offenses, there's minor petty offenses, then there's misdemeanors. So there's misdemeanors, there's the felonies, which are the big things, the misdemeanors, which are the small things, and then the petty offenses are just he took a gumball, he took 5 cents, a nickel or something. Just something that's so tiny and petty, and it's just get out of here. And then misdemeanors are almost like that, but that goes to the bottom court. And then the bigger court, they'll deal with the felonies. So the felonies are supposed to be the big things, right? But this is not a big thing at all. And then Ohio had a freedom-loving governor. And so he looks at this case and he's like, this is ridiculous. You want me to give this black man up, William Lago, and you want me to send him back to Kentucky? Denison was the governor of Kentucky at the time. Denison's a badass. He's going to set up some army brigades and a whole bunch of shit. He's going to help liberate West Virginia. Denison is a badass. So the governor of Ohio refuses to give up the black man who is charged with that ridiculous, stupid felony. So the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, he might not, protect Donald, but if he could get some sort of asylum claim and the governor was to protect him, well, then Donald should be okay. He should be, free and clear to live in Florida and be all right without having to worry about the New York legal bullshit. So sometimes you extradite, sometimes you don't. The 1861 Kentucky v. Denison says you don't extradite. You don't extradite. Now, the Puerto Rico v. Branstad is a 1987 case, and this is when you do extradite. So I think that the severity of the alleged crime matters between these two cases. Here in Puerto Rico v. Branstad, 1987, the court had reversed its decision under Denison. They said it's reversed, but I don't think so. I'm just I copy and pasted that. So scratch that. The case involved an Iowan. So a guy from Iowa, Ronald Calder, he's going to run over a married couple. He's going to run over them. He's going to strike them with his car. And then the husband survives, but the wife, who was 8 months pregnant, did not survive. I want to say the baby died too. So the wife dies, the baby dies, but the husband lives. This is in Aguadilla, Puerto Rico. So at first, the lower courts had said, well, that's just Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico's a territory. Ronald Calder, the Caucasian, he's not going to get a fair trial, fair shake in Puerto Rico. So the lower courts had said that, no, Puerto Rico cannot extradite Ronald Calder. Now, he murdered 2 people. He killed 2 people. Versus a kid that just walked north, a kid who just crossed the Ohio River and then got to freedom back in the days of slavery. What did he do? Well, he said he owned himself, officer. Well, we better go catch him. He ran, he walked, he swam. Well, he walked away, officer. Are you injured? Are you hurt? Well, he stole my property. He is his own property. He is his own person. He walked away. Get the hell out of here. But the Puerto Rico v. Branstad issue, he killed 2 people. He killed 2 people, and at first, the courts were on his side. You're not allowed to. So after the incident had happened, Ronald Calder is charged with murder, but he was let out on bail. And then when he was on bail, Ronald Calder goes to his home state of Iowa. He flees the scene. He flees Puerto Rico. Which, how did he get on the damn plane? Did he get a boat? How did he walk away? How did he get his freedom? Did he walk? Did he think he owned himself? What the hell was Ronald Calder? It's also interesting, both of these have race. You know, race is very prevalent in both of these cases. So May 1981, the governor of Puerto Rico had submitted a request to the governor of Iowa for the extradition of Ronald Calder to face the murder charges. The governor of Iowa refused the request. So again, if you could get Ron DeSantis in Florida to refuse the request of the governor from New York, well then Donald Trump is free and clear, you know, I would say forever, or until there's a governor who's willing to extradite him, assuming that it's an extraditable offense. You heard that first one that says that if it's marked non-extraditable, then the guy walks away. But if it's extraditable, then there's, you know, further proceedings, there's further. So the governor of Iowa was not obligated to return Calder. That's what the court had rejected, the request of the governor of Puerto Rico. And then eventually it's going to get to the Supreme Court in 1987. So 6 years later, it finally gets to the Supreme Court. The United States Court of Appeals for the 8th Circuit had affirmed the Supreme Court overruled its existing, they keep saying overruled. What other cases are there? These are the two main cases. So to overrule it, you had Plessy versus Ferguson, separate but equal. No, separate isn't equal. Equal is equal. So that's an overruling. To overrule it, you'd have to take the main holding and contradict the main holding. It doesn't contradict the main holding because it says that even, actually, Kentucky v. Dennison says you're supposed to do the extradition, but you can't compel, the Supreme Court cannot compel the governor in order to extradite. So the court rejected it. The Supreme Court overruled the Court of Appeals and reversed, and they ruled unanimously that the federal courts did indeed have the power to enforce a writ of mandamus. Again, this mandamus thing keeps coming up. So the federal court said that they did have the power to enforce a writ of mandamus, and that Kentucky v. Dennison did not apply to that thing. So fugitives for whom extradition has been refused under the former rule were now subject to extradition. So ultimately, what do those two federal case laws say? Puerto Rico v. Branstad says you can extradite. Kentucky v. Dennison says you cannot. So sometimes you extradite and sometimes you don't. We've already heard that from the one video. It's just kind of common sense anyways. So why don't you just ask yourself? Jesus says, can't you judge for yourself what's right and wrong, what's just and is not just? So if you're Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump says, I'm not going to this sentencing hearing, and then would you try to get him extradited? Because he would need a couple things, right? You'd have to get the governor to sign off on the thing. You'd have to get the copy of the indictment. And then he'd have to send the agent. Have to be within 30 days. Past 30 days, the federal law says he still gets to walk. So you'd have to make sure you cross your T's and dot your I's. You'd make sure that it's precise. But if you're Ron DeSantis and you come across the person that just say has a warrant, and let's say there hasn't been a designation for extraditable or non-extraditable. So a felony in one state could be jack shit in another state. So I think we got to ask ourselves some questions. You say, hey, person A has a warrant for their arrest, in New York, let's say, I don't know, Idaho. Oh, they got an arrest warrant from Idaho. Well, what were they doing? Well, they were just like Akira Fletcher and they defended themselves. Well, Akira Fletcher should be free. Let Akira Fletcher walk. What was it? Was it about jaywalking? Was it about some minor thing? Do they consider jaywalking a felony in Idaho? Look at the charge. See if you got a similar charge in your own state. Donald is guilty of 34 felonies. 34 felonies. And everybody's letting him walk around free as a jaybird. I mean, shouldn't he have already been extradited and sentenced? That's 34 motherfucking felonies. Does the word felony not mean anything? If he doesn't see 1 day of jail time, the word felony has no more meaning. It has no more meaning. So September 18th will be a very interesting day for Donald Trump in New York. They're saying he's going to go. They got the date there. They made some motions. They're getting a lot of the motions being rejected. There was one motion that says, well, he's in the process of appealing the thing. So that motion might be passed or rejected. We don't know yet. But as of right now, in 13 days, you got 5 days, you got the debate. So in 5 days, there's a presidential debate on September 10th. And then September 18th, just a week afterwards, he's supposed to go to sentencing. And I don't see why he wouldn't go straight to jail right after sentencing. What other hearing is there past sentencing? Hold on, Judge. Don't I get one more hearing? You had that one comedian that said, I think you just gave him a head start. That's what it sounds like to me. So you have to ask yourself some questions. You come across Donald Trump and they say, well, he's got a felony. And let's say New York went ahead and marked it extraditable. Well, you still have discretion. You still have discretion. Do you think the hush money case is a big enough issue to send Donald back to New York so he would have to serve his 4 years as the maximum per charge, 4 times 34. He's looking at 136 years if they give him the maximum sentence. So Donald's going to give this judge that power to put him in jail for 136 years. I bet you if he does go, he'll only go when he's promised that he won't go to jail right then and there. And I've already heard that he's not going to or he's not supposed to or something. So if he doesn't go to jail right then and there, he might show up for the thing. But he has an option to not do it. He just won't have to go back to New York anymore. And if he does go back to New York, then there is no extradition hearing at all. So you come across Donald Trump. He's got a hush money case. Do you think that's a big enough reason to send him back? Now, while he is convicted by a court of law, it is Donald. You got Al Capone on some tax evasion shit. So it depends on where you stand on the political spectrum, and it depends on the hush money case. Hush money, I don't give a shit about the porn star thing. I don't really, even too much care about. What I do care about is we got a corrupt criminal justice system, and we need a reform. He did do the First Step Act, but we need to reform the police, reform the criminal justice. But he's a thin blue line kind of guy, so whenever the cops do something, it's okay, and whenever the courts do something, it's a-okay. Well, he's a rich guy who could just afford lawyers who could get him out of this shit, right? So it's easy for him to be for the, thin blue line, because the cops are there to arrest all you poor people, all you poor ignorant people that don't know what the hell's going on. Meanwhile, Alec Baldwin, he shot Helena Hutchins in the face and killed her, and he's walking free as a bird too. So you have to ask yourself some questions. You do need an indictment, so you'd have to ask that question. Did they get the grand jury indictment? The paperwork's got to be in line. The indictment and the paperwork would have to be signed by the governor herself. And then it has to be completed within 30 days of the arrest. 30 days of the arrest, that's what the U.S. 1382 says. So you'd have to ask yourself some questions. You'd have to say, is it just or not just? If I'm Ron DeSantis, it would be a little tough of a decision, because it's not that the hush money thing's a big deal. A lot of shit, the January 6th shit is a big deal. You just even heard Nick Fuentes, the fucking Nazi motherfucker, was like, man, you shouldn't lie to us. We listened to your lies and we thought it was true, and so now we got ourselves in trouble for all this shit for you because of your damn lie. The big lie. That's what CNN called it over and over again. The big lie, because that's exactly what it was. Stop the steal, stop the steal. How much money did he get for the Stop the Steal movement? There was one guy who seemed actually kind of sad. Wait a second. My president lied to me? He lied? And it's like, he's lied 30,000 times while he was president. So is that really that shocking? And the other thing, I've also heard this argument where they said, hey, it's not an insurrection. He didn't try to overthrow the government. It was just a big protest that got out of hand that turned into a riot. So that's okay? No, the Riot Act is that you're not supposed to start a riot. You're not allowed to initiate a riot. I don't see how that's an argument, because it's like, hey, officer, I wasn't starting an insurrection. I was just starting a riot. Oh, okay. Well, then you get to go free. So he's done other things that makes me think that it's like an Al Capone situation. Tax evasion isn't that big a deal, but Al Capone's like, committing other crimes. So I would weigh out those two elements. I would say the hush money thing, I don't give a damn. I don't care. He's got a wife. Of course he's got to pay her off. You don't want her going around saying everything that she did. And then, from Stormy Daniels' perspective, she's getting all this free publicity, all this free attention. She got a $130,000 check. And then she got to have sex, right? I don't know how fun or not fun the sex was. But she's kind of getting older. And I feel like from her perspective, she consented to the original thing, and then $130,000 to make her sign some, non-disclosure agreement. She got paid once, she got paid twice. They're both adults. They made their own agreement. Who cares? But then with the business, falsifying business records, falsifying government records, there's also the political aspect. You're running for president and you're getting donations from people, and then you're using that money to pay off the porn star. So that's campaign finance violations, which typically have been a big deal. And if you ever run for office, you know, it's like in the back of your mind was like, well, shit, I'm just not going to accept any donations, so that way I don't have to deal with the campaign finance donations laws. But if you could figure out the campaign finance donations laws, you could get millions of dollars into your coffers. And then if you're doing it fraudulently. So I got 10 questions here. You come across Donald Trump. He skips out on the sentencing hearing. They issue a warrant for his arrest. Or anybody is walking around with the warrant, you'd have to ask yourself, is the person guilty? Did they actually do the damn deed? Is it, you know, rape? Is it kidnapping, arson, stealing? What is it? Is it bearing false witness? Was it murder? And then who was it against? Was it, you know, self-defense? Or was it against some guilty person that was trying to rob you? Or not? Was it against some innocent person that was vulnerable to begin with? So you'd have to ask that question. Is the person guilty? Shooting a person over a corrupt criminal justice system which railroaded him would be some major bullshit. That would be some major bullshit. Now, is the crime alleged a big deal? Some felonies, right? 34 felonies he's walking around. But is the crime a big deal? To me, the hush money thing to Stormy Daniels, that's not a big deal. Falsifying business records, that's fraudulent, that's lying, that's bearing false witness. That's a bigger deal. I'm not for sure if I'd still think that it's a level to a felony. In my mind, the felonies are the big things. Felonies are the big things. You can't rob people in a way. I guess it is kind of stealing in some respects. So I'd have to weigh it out. It seems to me I would be forgiving on the hush money part, but with the campaign finance violations and the other, you know, January 6th and the other shit that he's done, and then the extent that I would think falsifying business and government documents, how big of a deal is that to me? You know, on the ledger, he just marked it 34 times on the ledger, so it seems like it's kind of the same crime over and over again. So you'd have to ask that. Is the person guilty? Did he get railroaded? Did he have due process? Is it one of the 12 worst crimes out here, right? I had a list somewhere of the 12 worst crimes. But is it a felony? A felony is a big crime. Is there an injured party? Who's the injured party in this? If she got paid, I mean, maybe she got, I mean, I guess Melania would be the injured party, right? Stormy's getting, you know, publicity. That's good for her career. She's an actress. She's getting in. Does your own state have a similar law? Do you have falsifying business record? If you don't, then that means you don't even care about this stuff in your own state. If it's illegal in Texas, you know, saying cowboy hats are ugly or something, well, that's fighting words. Your cowboy hat's a fighting word. But that's not illegal in Maine. If you call a cowboy hat ugly, is that fighting words in Texas? Maybe it is, but in Maine, it's not. So Texas would call it a felony, whereas Maine wouldn't. I think you'd have to size the person up yourself. Is the person a notorious gangster? Or are they some poor, powerless nobody? Do you think that what are they going to do? They shot a couple warning shots because somebody was sitting there threatening to murder them? Well, that's nothing. Who gives a crap? And if you're a Maine person, and Maine was giving, you know, some shit for that, so you went to Texas, would Texas give a shit about that? Don't they believe in the Second Amendment? Don't they believe in the Constitution? Don't you have a right to defend yourself? And then nobody was injured. So ask yourself, does your own state have a similar law? Is it one of the terrible crimes that you would think is a felony? Is the crime alleged a big deal? Is the person guilty of it? Did they get railroaded? Was there some bullshit when it comes to the trial itself? Was it equal protection? Did the person who committed 200 major felonies get away with it, and then the act of self-defense is the thing that the cops had a problem with? So 200 major felonies was bullshit, but the cop was going to arrest the victim? That doesn't make any sense. Was there an investigation? Was the trial fair? That's another question. Was the trial fair? Was the process fair? Was the trial fair? Did he get the subpoenas? Did he get all the witnesses that he wanted? Did he get all the documents that he wanted? Because you have a right to subpoena, the right and proper witnesses. The eyewitnesses, did you get all the eyewitnesses in there? Did you get all the documents that's in there? The person, Phil Greeny, who took a picture, did you get him in there? Was the process fair? There's rules of evidence and procedure. They were all used right. Was it in defense of self? That makes sense, right? To actually look at the case itself. Okay, they wrote down here that you were jaywalking, but they went ahead and said that you assaulted a police officer. Well, was that the case? Ask the person, maybe even, look beyond just the charge. Falsifying business, so he's got 34 felonies. If you're just a lay cop and you see Donald Trump with 34 felonies, how do you not make an arrest? Oh, it was over a library book? Well, we're going to let you walk because a library book, who gives a shit? You're going to the library and you're reading. We want people to go to the library and use the institutions. And is that a warrantable offense? You need to arrest a person and possibly have, come on. We need to make sure that it's felonies, it's big felonies that a common person, that would strike the common person's conscience. What? A library book? You're damn right he needs to get arrested. Jaywalking? Hell yeah. Falsifying business records and lying on government forms, breaking campaign finance laws. For Stormy Daniels, hush money? Oh, that's fun. Were they petitioning? Were they peacefully assembling? Was a soldier trying to quarter in their house? Was it one of the Bills of Rights? Are they being railroaded of their constitutional rights? Were the constitutional rights upheld? Were there other criminals? What was the whole deal? What was the whole deal, Pickle? Hear the person out. I know people lie, but they can't lie nonstop over and over again. A wrangled web we weave when we practice to deceive. Does it sound reasonable? Does it sound like something that could happen? And just keep on asking questions. They can answer these questions wrongly, right? So I think you should ask yourself a couple questions. What Donald can do, Donald could seek out a state in America who will give him asylum. Ron DeSantis, he did call him sanctimonious, so he might not let Donald stay in his state. But there's other Republicans out there that they wouldn't cheat on the election, but I think they would let him stay in the state because they think it's political. He had a whole bunch of fundraising for the thing. So I think Donald could find one of the states in America. He once mentioned to Elon Musk that he was going to run off to Venezuela because crimes are going up in America, but they're going down in Venezuela, which that's pretty remarkable, isn't it? Donald tried to overthrow Venezuela. Now he's going to run to Venezuela because that's a good safe haven for him. What in the hell are you talking about? What in the hell are you talking about? You get a couple hotels there now, so now he likes Venezuela? He had a motion, well, let's see. Political, believing to be innocent. They don't believe the laws were broken, were good laws, or that they actually raised to a level of a felony. So if he could find somebody that would give him asylum and be like Julian Assange, California, Oregon, Washington, he could go to Montana. There's a Republican governor in Montana who body slammed a reporter. So that guy did some violence, and then he only, got a slap on the wrist. So I feel like Greg Gianforte, he's running for governor right now, so maybe not because it's political season. I think Donald could find a state where he could get the permission, first for asylum. Now, there's also several appeals levels. The trial court's the bottom level, then there's the appeals court, then there's the Supreme Court, and then there's the federal courts. They got a district court, an appeals court, and a Supreme Court as well. So he filed that motion saying that he was appealing the sentencing hearing. And since the case is being appealed, then that means he doesn't even think he should go to the sentencing hearing, which there is an argument to be made there. Because you're appealing the conviction, you're appealing the verdict, you're appealing the decision, you're appealing the problems of the due process of the trial. The sentencing, if the guy just says you can get the hell out of there, I guess in a way it's a gamble. If he goes to sentencing and they just say, pay $1 and get the hell out of here. Well, then that's nothing. Pay your $1 and then, let the judge say whatever he's going to say and then you get to walk free. Julian Assange did some sort of deal like that where he said yes to a lesser deal or some shit. So I think that's a good motion, but the judge in New York might not agree with that. You can't appeal before the sentencing. You must have a sentence first. Sure you can. You're appealing the decision. You're appealing all the errors, the reversible errors. How many reversible errors happened that would have been due to the trial court? What's going to happen in the sentencing? Is this going to give us more errors to appeal? No, you're appealing how the cops handled it, how the courts handled it. And then once the appeal goes through and it fails, then sentence and then punishment. Donald does have a history of non-compliance with previous court orders, so there's something you'd have to look out for. Falsifying business records is punishable to up to 4 years behind bars. 4 times 34 is 136. Technically speaking, if that New York judge wants to throw the book at him and give him the maximum sentence, Donald could be looking at 136 years in jail. Does he deserve it for falsifying business records? No. But overthrowing our capital, overthrowing our democracy, telling all these other people, you're the president and you just lied to your own people and got them to throw their bodies upon the wheels and the gears and the lever, not for justice, not to cure the homelessness, not to stop poverty, not to stop war, but to make sure Daddy Donald gets to keep on having power, even though he knows he lost. By a whisker, he says he lost. And so since he's a thin blue line guy, if he didn't want to do the time, he shouldn't have done the crime. His own philosophy is actually haranguing him. He's actually being hamstringed by himself and his own philosophy. Cops and courts could do no wrong. Well, hell, if you can't get a lawyer to come up with some argument that the judge agrees with, you might see Donald walk into jail for 136 years. And how many poor people have to go through this shit? How many poor and ignorant people have to go through all this shit all the time, railroaded by the cops, railroaded by the system, and now they're in jail for the rest of their lives? Rich men can just commit a crime and then pay a lawyer and get away with the crime. A poor man might not even have gone, did anything that's worthy of note whatsoever. But he's poor and the damn cop is just a douchebag and wants to put hands on people. So that's bullshit. A poor person or ignorant person could go to jail for many years. A misdemeanor could be stuck in a court system for many years. Not due to the heinousness, not due to the, violent injury or the feloniousness of the offense, but because they're too poor or too ignorant. And the rich and powerful could just straight up commit the crimes and then just pay a damn lawyer to get them out of trouble. Other potential sentences, Trump could see a probation, a fine, or conditional discharge, which would require Trump to stay out of trouble to avoid additional punishment. He's the first ex-president to be convicted of a crime. Trump will be required to be present in Merchan's Manhattan courtroom when he is sentenced. So Merchan, I guess, is the judge. Manhattan is where it's at. So just a little breakdown.